Rome, 80 CE. The Colosseum has just opened, and Emperor Titus has promised the most spectacular inaugural games in history. You are among the 50,000 spectators packed into this architectural marvel, the largest amphitheater ever built. The morning has already seen hundreds of animals slaughtered in elaborate hunts. Now, as midday approaches, the arena floor opens, and a mechanical elevator rises from below, carrying a terrified man dressed in a crude costume. He is supposed to represent Orpheus, the legendary musician who could charm wild beasts with his lyre. The crowd roars with anticipation. Then the second elevator rises, carrying not musicians but a fully grown brown bear that hasn't been fed in 3 days. This is not entertainment. This is not sport. This is a carefully choreographed execution designed to mock the condemned man's final moments, while thrilling the crowd with his terror and death. This is damnatio ad bestias, condemnation to the beasts, and it represents just one of the twisted gladiatorial spectacles that made Rome the most sophisticated purveyor of death as entertainment the world has ever known. Before we enter the arena and witness the 4 most twisted gladiator death matches Rome devised, hit subscribe so you don't miss our next descent into how empires turned human suffering into applause. Now, take your seat in the stands. The gates are opening, and what you're about to see will reveal why Roman spectacles became synonymous with cruelty throughout history. The first twisted spectacle we must examine is damnatio ad bestias itself, a form of public execution that Rome transformed into theatrical performance. Unlike gladiatorial combat where trained fighters had at least some chance of survival, damnatio ad bestias was designed to ensure death while maximizing entertainment value for spectators. The condemned, usually criminals convicted of serious crimes like murder, arson, or sacrilege, along with Christians who refused to worship Roman gods, would be sent into the arena to face hungry predators with no weapons and no hope of survival. But Rome didn't simply throw people to lions and call it entertainment. They created elaborate mythological reenactments, where the condemned would be forced to play doomed characters from classical stories. A prisoner might be costumed as Icarus and hoisted on mechanical wings before being dropped into a pit of bears. Another might play Hercules, tied to a stake and burned alive in a tunic soaked with pitch, reenacting the hero's death by poisoned garment. These fatal performances combined execution with theater, making death into a spectacle that was both morally instructive and viscerally thrilling. The logistics of damnatio ad bestias reveal Rome's systematic approach to mass death as entertainment. The Colosseum had a hypogeum, an elaborate underground system of tunnels, cages, and mechanical lifts. This subterranean complex allowed beasts to be held below the arena floor and then raised on elevators at precisely the right dramatic moment. Stagehands operated trapdoors, moving platforms, and sophisticated machinery that made executions appear seamless to the audience above. Historical records indicate that during the inaugural games of the Colosseum, over 9,000 animals were killed across 100 days of spectacles. Many of these kills involved human victims. The poet Martial wrote detailed descriptions of these execution performances, praising their creativity and dramatic impact. His accounts reveal audiences who cheered louder for clever deaths than quick ones, who appreciated the theatrical touches that made executions into memorable performances rather than simple killings. The animals used in damnatio ad bestias were deliberately starved before their arena appearances to make them more aggressive and likely to attack immediately. Lions, bears, leopards, and even more exotic creatures like crocodiles and elephants were all employed. The variety of predators allowed for different types of spectacles, with audiences developing preferences for certain animal victim pairing. A Christian martyr thrown to lions became so common that it entered Roman artistic and literary tradition as an archetypal image. Archaeological evidence of damnatio ad bestias comes from multiple sources. Animal bones bearing marks of starvation have been found in storage areas beneath amphitheaters across the empire. Human remains showing teeth marks consistent with large predators have been recovered from mass graves near arena sites. Contemporary accounts from both Roman and Christian sources describe these executions in detail, though with very different moral interpretations. The second twisted spectacle is the naumachiae, or staged naval battle. Rome didn't just fight gladiators and execute criminals in arenas. They flooded entire stadiums to stage massive water battles, involving real ships and thousands of condemned men. The scale and ambition of naumachiae represent Roman engineering and cruelty at their most spectacular. Julius Caesar inaugurated the practice in 46 BCE, excavating an enormous artificial lake near the Tiber River, specifically for staging a naval battle. He filled the basin with water and real warships, then forced thousands of war captives to fight as opposing fleets. These weren't actors or volunteers, but condemned men fighting with real weapons for the entertainment of Roman crowds. Arrows flew, ships rammed each other, and men drowned or were cut down until one side was completely annihilated. Augustus expanded on Caesar's innovation, creating an even larger naumachiae basin, measuring approximately 1,800 by 1,200 feet and fed by a custom-built aqueduct, the Aqua Alsiatina, dedicated solely to filling the artificial lake for naval spectacles. Augustus' most famous naumachiae reenacted the Battle of Salamis with 30 warships and 3,000 combatants plus additional rowers. The scale was staggering. Essentially a medium-sized naval battle, staged entirely for entertainment purposes. What made naumachiae particularly twisted was how Rome combined authentic naval combat with the certainty of mass death. The combatants were not trained gladiators but condemned prisoners, captives and slaves, who likely had limited experience with ships or naval warfare. They were given authentic weapons and ordered to fight to the death while tens of thousands of spectators watched from elevated seating around the artificial lake. The most famous line associated with Roman spectacles, "Those who are about to die salute you," comes from a naumachiae staged by Emperor Claudius in 52 CE. Before the battle commenced, the condemned combatants supposedly called out to the emperor, "Morituri te salutant." Those about to die salute you. Whether this actually happened or is a later literary invention, the phrase captures the grim reality of naumachiae. These were not sporting contests, but mass executions dressed as entertainment. The engineering required for naumachiae was extraordinary. Creating basins large enough for ship combat, filling them with millions of gallons of water, then draining them afterward represented massive logistical undertakings. Later emperors adapted the Colosseum itself for smaller naumachiae by flooding the arena floor through channels built into the foundation. This required sealing the hypogeum, making the underground animal and gladiator chambers waterproof, so the main floor could hold several feet of water. The spectacle of watching ships ram each other, combatants boarding enemy vessels with swords and spears, men drowning in water that gradually turned red with blood, all played out in front of massive crowds, represents Roman entertainment at its spot, most grandiose and grotesque. The fusion of technological achievement, massive resource expenditure, and casual acceptance of death as diversion reveals an empire at the peak of power and moral bankruptcy. The third twisted spectacle involves the specific category of gladiators known as naumachiae, condemned criminals forced to fight without training or proper equipment. Unlike professional gladiators who were valuable investments, trained for years and given quality armor and weapons, naumachiae were throwaway fighters sent into the arena with the expectation that they would die badly and quickly, providing comic relief. Between more skilled matches, naumachiae would be given wooden swords, broken armor, or deliberately mismatched equipment designed to make them ineffective. They might be forced to fight against heavily armed opponents, against multiple adversaries simultaneously, or even against each other with the rule that only the last survivor would be spared, forcing mutual slaughter among people who had no combat training. The crowd would laugh at their clumsy attempts to fight and cheer when they were inevitably cut down. Some naumachiae spectacles involved elaborate, cruel games. Condemned criminals might be told that if they could survive against 3 opponents, they would be freed. After defeating 3, they would be told it was actually 5 opponents. If they survived 5, the number would change again. The goal wasn't to offer real hope, but to extract maximum effort and entertainment before the inevitable death. The crowd enjoyed watching desperate men cling to false promises while being systematically destroyed. Another variation involved pairing naumachiae with disabled fighters, dwarfs, or women, creating matchups designed to be humorous rather than impressive. Roman audiences found entertainment in watching people who could not properly defend themselves try to fight. Women forced into the arena, called gladiatrices, were sometimes skilled fighters, but often they were simply criminals or slaves thrown into combat for novelty value and crowd amusement. The legal framework surrounding naumachiae reveals how Rome systematized this cruelty. Certain crimes automatically resulted in condemnation ad gladium or ad ludum, to the sword or to the gladiatorial school. Once condemned, criminals lost all legal personhood and could be used however arena officials saw fit. They could be killed immediately in quick executions, used as practice targets for genuine gladiators, or forced into humiliating combat scenarios for crowd entertainment. Records from the gladiatorial schools show that naumachiae had dramatically higher death rates than professional gladiators. While trained gladiators might survive 60 to 70% of their matches due to their value and skill, naumachiae rarely survived even a single appearance. They were expendable commodities. Humans reduced to disposable entertainment products. Their deaths considered both just punishment and public amusement. The fourth and perhaps most psychologically twisted spectacle was the category of gladiatorial matches called sensationalist, without mercy or release. In regular gladiatorial combat, a losing fighter could appeal for datmatio, dismissal from the bout, if they fought bravely. The sponsor of the games or the crowd through their gestures would decide whether to grant mercy or demand death. But in sensationalist matches, no appeal was possible. The combat continued until one fighter was dead, regardless of bravery, skill, or crowd sentiment. Sensationalist matches were often forced upon particularly skilled gladiators, creating matchups where popular champions would face each other with the certainty that one would die. This forced the crowd to watch fighters they admired kill each other, adding emotional investment and tragedy to the violence. Fans who had followed a gladiator's career, learned his fighting style, perhaps even placed bets on his victories, would have to watch him die or kill a fellow champion they also admired. Emperors sometimes mandated sensationalist matches for specific occasions or as punishments for gladiators who had displeased them. This transformed what was usually a sport with survival possibilities into guaranteed execution, just with the condemned man given a sword and a chance to kill his executioner first. The twisted logic was that dying in combat was more honorable than simple execution. So, forcing skilled fighters into death matches was framed as giving them an honorable end. Historical accounts describe sensationalist matches that lasted for hours, with both combatants wounded but forced to continue until one could no longer fight. The crowd would watch stamina and blood loss gradually take their toll, seeing which fighter could endure longest. Medical knowledge was sometimes applied in perverse ways, with arena physicians intervening not to save lives, but to keep both fighters conscious and able to continue combat even as injuries accumulated. The psychological torture of sensationalist extended beyond the fighters themselves. Gladiators often formed close bonds with training partners and fellow fighters in their gladiatorial school. Sensationalist matches could force these comrades to kill each other, knowing that refusing meant execution anyway, but as a coward rather than a warrior. This created impossible moral dilemmas that broke fighters psychologically even before the physical combat began. What unites all four of these twisted spectacles is their systematic nature. These weren't spontaneous outbursts of violence, but carefully planned entertainment requiring significant resources and organization. Damnatio ad bestias needed animal capture and transport networks spanning the empire. Naumachiae required engineering projects on the scale of major infrastructure works. Naumachiae spectacles needed legal frameworks to produce sufficient condemned criminals. Sensationalist matches required large rosters of skilled gladiators whose deaths could be treated as expendable entertainment. The Roman appetite for these spectacles grew over time rather than diminishing. Each emperor tried to outdo his predecessors with more elaborate, more deadly, more spectacular games. The costs were enormous, bankrupting some emperors and requiring others to conquer new territories, partly to acquire more captives for arena deaths. The games became an addiction for Roman society, with citizens demanding increasingly extreme entertainment and accepting nothing less than death as the proper conclusion to any spectacle. The moral rot at the core of Roman spectacles becomes clear when we consider how they justified this systematic cruelty. Criminals deserved death, so making that death entertaining was acceptable. Captives were enemies of Rome, so using them as entertainment was triumphant celebration. Gladiators were slaves or condemned persons without full human rights, so their deaths mattered less than citizen enjoyment. Every category of victim was othered and dehumanized to make their suffering palatable to audiences who otherwise considered themselves civilized. The economic systems supporting arena deaths created perverse incentives. Merchants specialized in capturing and transporting animals for beast shows. Slave traders maintained separate inventory of combat-suitable males for gladiatorial schools. Arena architects designed ever more sophisticated machinery for staging deaths. An entire economy developed around converting human lives into entertainment experiences, normalizing mass death through market forces. The long-term impact of Roman arena spectacles on Western culture cannot be understated. The Colosseum became an iconic symbol of Rome, but also of civilization that has lost its moral compass. Christian martyrdom narratives centered on arena deaths, creating powerful stories of faith tested through Rome as cruelest entertainment. The eventual decline and fall of Rome was interpreted by later moralists as divine judgment for spectacles that celebrated death. So tell us, which of these four twisted spectacles reveals the darkest aspect of Roman entertainment? The damnatio ad bestias that turned execution into theatrical performance? The naumachiae that staged naval battles with thousands of condemned men dying for crowd amusement? The naumachiae matches that made comedy from desperate criminals given no chance of survival? Or the sensationalist combats that forced skilled fighters to kill each other with no possibility of mercy? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And if this exploration of Rome's most twisted gladiatorial spectacles has fascinated you, subscribe so you don't miss our next journey into how empires justify turning human suffering into mass entertainment. Until then, remember that the Colosseum still stands as a monument not to Roman greatness, but to humanity's capacity to normalize and celebrate cruelty when power goes unchecked